Hey everyone, welcome to the American Sidebar podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fitzgerald. It's September 1st, 2023. Along with me is my co-host,
Brian Mason.
On today's show, we have Alec Lace. Alec is the host of the Alec Lace podcast and First Class Fatherhood. He also has a book out titled First Class Fatherhood. Where else can we find him, Brian?
You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
www.firstclassfatherhood.com.
.com, yeah. You can find him on his website.
And he's also on Apple Podcasts under the Alec Lace Show and First Class Fatherhood, as well as Spotify. Stand by for the show.
Tick, tick, boom. Who bringing the noise? Go, baby, we bringing our toys. Separate men from the boys. Chopper be singing, she'll be on the voice. Bang, bang, we gon' ride out. Gang, gang, we don't die out.
And we're live. Welcome to the show, Alec. Alec, we talked a little bit outside about kind of how you got started, but for our audience here, how'd you get started?
All right, so I never ever had an idea about starting a podcast, but 5 years ago, a part-time gig of mine is driving Uber, and I used to drive regular cabs in the city, metered cabs, and then switched over to Uber. And driving on Friday and Saturday night, a lot of the young men, when I would tell them I had 4 kids, they would always look at me like I had 4 heads. And they would always be like, 4 kids? Like, that's insane. I would never want to have kids. They all had this negative attitude towards getting married, starting a family, having kids. They looked at it as something that's going to ruin their life. They're like, why in the world would anybody want to do that? And I would always try to encourage them and try to explain to them, like, it could actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I would always have these conversations, and I was like, man, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I should just put a tape on so I could just play it for these young guys. Yeah. And that's why I was like, well, podcasting had just become really huge at that point where it was available to everybody. Anchor launched that same year in 2018, so it made it simple for you to start one. So I said, I'll start one on fatherhood and just put these messages out. And that's really the genesis of how First Class Fatherhood started.
That's cool. Yeah, it's funny, when we kind of got started, it was more towards, kind of the confusion, what was going on in media, whether, people were getting canceled or, we couldn't really find the information, so we kind of, did our own research, right? It's funny, I came up with the conclusion at the end of it that I think this has always been going on, right? They've kind of always had their own agenda, whether it was, CNN, Fox News, or whomever, right? And we realized over time, I started to kind of look back at like different things that happened, right? And not to put like, full tinfoil hat, but, you start looking at like the moon landing, the Challenger, and like kind of all these things. And, we kind of looked at that all over again and through another lens and realized they couldn't really fathom at that point that, the internet was going to kick off the way it did, right? And the information age was going to happen the way it did. So I think they were a lot looser, right, with kind of hiding information than they kind of are now,
Yeah, well, one thing that's for sure is you can put a video out about trying to say we never landed on the moon. You could put a video out about flat Earth. You could put videos out about Kennedy's assassination and all other conspiracy theory videos you want.
Yeah.
But if you mention that the 2020 election was stolen, they'll pull your video right down. It's not allowed to be said. And I found that out by having certain guys on my show where my YouTube channel is one strike away from being completely gone, and it's so suppressed right now to the point where everything is down, and my reach is reduced to very minimal on YouTube now. And
we could probably get you about 5 more followers.
Yeah.
I'll click it 10 times.
But that's exactly what has happened though to them trying to control the content that's on there. That's why now I started the new show, the Alec Lace Show on Rumble, where they don't suppress that. So I've been having some success in talking political because my intention was never to get into politics doing this because I've always been conservative.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the goal of the show. It was to bring dads from all walks of life on and show that this is what connects us, even though the media is trying to divide us in so many different ways. You're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, you're gay, I'm straight, you're black, I'm white. They divide us in all these different categories. But when you start talking to somebody about being a father, you realize that we're exactly the same. We want our kids to be successful. We want them to be healthy. We want them to do good and be good people. And we don't want to see them, hurt or fail. And so we all have that in common. And that's what we need to do to bring. And I do think the parents are the ones that are going to turn this country around, because even the parents that are on the Democrat side don't like what they're seeing in the school systems around the country. So it's parents uniting is really what's going to make the change in the country.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because, you're talking about these, like, different labels that they kind of put us in. You look back at kind of, over time, it's always been something. You know what I mean? It's always been, whether it was race or, the gay and lesbian or like whatever, right? They kind of always put us in our silos. And now it seems to be, especially since like 2020, I think it became more polarizing, right, to everybody, right? And I just, at this point, it's so polarizing and so, it's, how do we get out of it? You know what I mean? That's the biggest question for me. It's like, I know that, I try to do my best, especially, I am conservative, I am Republican. But that's, it's, I guess it's in, it's kind of, comes off of my aura a little bit, but, deep down, I am a parent, right? I'm a human being, right? I'm a family man, right? I'm a business owner. And, an overall good person, right? And I think that's what we need to come back to. But you don't really have that now. It's always the labels, right? No matter what. And they, whether it's a TV or, whatever, right? It's always, I never looked at somebody when they came through the door or they were at the gym and said, that's a black person, that's an Indian person, that's a gay person. You know what I mean? I never thought of it that way, right? But you see it now, and people are, very agitated. And, I hope at some point, we can get somebody in that kind of, mellows this all out. But I don't know. It's worrisome for me, especially as a parent, right?
It's going to take civil discourse, being able to sit down and have conversations like this. And that's one of the things is the political atmosphere in this country is so toxic right now. Mm-hmm. And that was another reason why I didn't want to get into the politics and talk about it, because when I get done talking about politics, I feel like taking the headphones off and bashing my head against the wall.
Yeah.
But when you have a conversation about family life and fatherhood and stuff, it's a feel-good conversation. You feel good talking about it, and you're putting out a positive message for other young dads out there or about to be dads who are fearful about what they're about to get into. So all around, it's a good feeling. But when you start talking politics, it starts to get you can fly off the handle in a drop of a hat.
Have you interviewed a lot of Democrats?
I've had a lot of Democrats, but left-leaning people, not even knowing if they're politics what they really are, but they're left-leaning, like Jason Alexander from Seinfeld, George Costanza. He's somebody that I don't know if he's a Democrat, but he's obviously very left-wing. You could see by his posts and stuff like that on Twitter. Sure. But I've had Congressman Jimmy Gomez from California. I had Senator Bob Kerrey, who ran for president and lost the nomination to Bill Clinton. He's also a Medal of Honor recipient, Navy SEAL. A really great guy. But I have more success reaching out to conservatives. Now, I would say for every 10 guests I reach out to, I get one. And I've been very successful at getting conservatives, because when you start talking about fatherhood, family life, it's right down the street from conservatism. And when you talk about the nuclear family in particular, it's easier to talk to conservatives about that, because the Democratic side, you heard the President of the United States said there's no such thing as somebody else's kid. These are our kids.
Yeah.
Like, that's that Marxist mindset that drives you nuts. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not right. And that's really one of the reasons why I launched that Alec show, is because when he said that, I was like, it's enough. Like, it's got to stop.
Scary.
It is scary.
As far as the, so I saw that you actually wrote a book as well.
Yeah, I did a book with HarperCollins last year.
Okay.
It was really based on the first 250 guests that I had on the show. So since then, I'm up to 720-something now, people that have been on. But that was really focused on, it's advice and wisdom from high-profile dads. So it's all of this mixture of people that gave their best advice, and I put that into the book. So that was the idea of that. And interestingly enough, promoting that book, it was only Fox News, Newsmax, America's Voice that would pick me up to bring me on to promote the book. The left-wing media outlets wanted nothing to do with it, because some of the people in the book, like Eric Trump, who's been on the show a few times, Mike Lindell, Rudy Giuliani, these guys, they didn't want nothing to do with the book, even though the book has nothing to do with politics. It's just about family life and fatherhood. They wouldn't bring me on.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
And I had told HarperCollins about that beforehand. I said, you realize this is going to be a little difficult to get on. And they didn't believe me. And the first, they were like, we can't believe the responses we're getting from like NBC, ABC, but they're like, they gave us like some nasty responses. Like, we'll never promote a book on our platform that has these guys in it.
And you're saying this is about fatherhood.
Right.
This is not politics.
Exactly.
This is fatherhood right here.
It's everybody now, and it's the first thing, right? And the funny thing is and I don't know if you've kind of been the same, but I've noticed, and you know, I was in the Marine Corps. I moved to California, you know, liberal cesspool, right? I mean, it's crazy. So I lived there. I lived in Silicon Valley after that, and I've been kind of living with liberals kind of my whole life, right? And I never.
Joe,
really...
you haven't always been a conservative, though.
No. But that's the point, right? So you're. And it's funny because I heard later on that, you know, you kind of adapt to your environment, right? Not knowing you kind of get brainwashed, but you don't realize that you're brainwashed because that's just your environment, right? So, you know, and part of it, you know, voting for Obama in 2012 and others was probably because of that, right? Just living in that area, right? And, you know, kind of getting that ingrained. But the people that kind of followed me across, right? You know, whether it was, you know, the servicemen that I, you know, was with in the Marines, or, you know, college, or after college, you know, just starting, you know, over at, I worked at eBay for a long time. And the people that I kept with me happened to be really conservative. And they happened to be my best friends, right, that I've kept from all those different, you know, timelines. And now I look back at it, and I would write something on, you know, Facebook or something, or, you know, kind of social media, and they'd like it. And it was kind of like that aha moment, you know, kind of that you kind of attract, you know, who you are, right, deep down. I guess you kind of attract that. So it was just interesting, you know, kind of to see that.
They say you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, you know, and so the group that you hang around with is important, and that's what's important with kids as they grow up, because it's the influence they'll have on you, and you got to be the gatekeeper of your mind, you know. What's the saying is like, you know, beware of the thief on the street that's after your purse, but be aware of the thief in your mind that's after your promise, you know, and so you got to be the gatekeeper of your mind, and when you surround yourself with people that have these kind of negative attitudes towards America, towards God, towards family, you start to pick up on that, and that becomes your own identity.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because I kind of went around on this because I, you know, kind of started off really religious. I was, you know, Irish Catholic, grew up in the church. I was actually an altar boy, you know.
Me too.
Coming
Same,
in.
yeah.
And then, you know, 3 altar boys. We should make a podcast about 3
I was
altar
the
boys.
best bell ringer in the whole PH church in Sunset Park.
I was the, what do you call it? The incense kind of.
Nice.
It's funny how we learned you used to have to keep that little silver platter under the chin, like took the host, like they did away with
it's
that.
very serious.
Oh, yeah.
To be like a big, like, oh, you know, hold it under there.
Well, it's funny. I won't go off into a tangent here, but it's funny now because I'll go into, you know, kind of St. Mary's, and they say, you know, the prayer is different than I learned.
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
And it's funny, you know, because I'll say something and it'll be like, and someone will look at me because I'll say it a little louder.
Old
something,
school.
You know? Yeah, and they'll look at me like, what's wrong with him?
Yeah,
How dare you express it?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, like when they say, you know, the peace be with you, also with you, or, you know, also with
your spirit.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, they
and I'm
changed
like,
that.
what the heck is that? You know,
But just like you, like I just recently had Representative Misha Maynor, who came on the podcast in Georgia. She's in that same district, that Fulton County, that Georgia district there. And she switched parties. She was a lifelong Democrat and changed to be Republican. And she became the first black woman Republican in the House in Georgia. And I asked everybody asking her, like, what made you switch? She said, you know, once I got in and became a politician and I could see the policies and what the effect they were having on the community, and every time I wanted to make an actual change, I was getting shot down by my own party. And then I realized I was being more receptive to my policies from the Republican side. So she switched over there. She's like, because now I can actually make some kind of effect and change in my community.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens when you get exposed to it. You realize, well, this isn't actually doing it. That's why you see Democrat cities that have been Democrat for decades, and there's been no change, yet they keep voting Democrat time and time again. It makes you, you know, wonder why.
Yeah, that's what I was going with it. So when you know, and it was kind of that buildup, right? So, you know, the Obama era, and then, you know, in 2012, it kind of flipped, and I was kind of just voting for, you know, whoever I liked at that point, right? I was, you know, I voted for George Bush and, you know, both right? I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Oy.
I got a lot of
Wow.
I got a lot
Can you
of
pause this
smack
while I
for
go
that.
throw up?
Yeah. That's rough.
Well, I'll tell you. Here's the reason, right? And it may not be a great reason to you guys, but it was the reason for me. In 2016, I started the company. So I left, my long-standing company. I was there for 10 years. Left, got a little nest egg up and running, and started the company. Trump was actually, speaking about, when he was talking about Mexico and Brazil and all the others, and I was nervous about it because that's where I was actually doing business. So I started with Mexico and Brazil, China, right? So I started internationally because that's kind of the, the secret sauce, if you will, for, if you're a smaller company and you have access to those, type of, regions, it's a lot easier for you to kind of break in because a lot of companies don't have knowledge of those areas. So that's what I did. So anyway, that was it. And he actually did exactly what I thought he was going to do. And I was mad in the beginning, and then it kind of worked itself out somehow. So with China in particular, do you remember the whole thing that was going on with the routers and stuff that was, the highway or whatever it was called? They were spying on us.
Oh, right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
China. So that was there was some kind of like routers that they were putting, in the United States, and supposedly they had sniffers for, China being in there. And so during that whole thing, we put, I guess, sanctions on them, and and they turned around and did the same thing to us. But what they did to us was even worse. We used to be able to have our own services and our own data centers there. They actually put some devices in between us. So before I can have access directly to my customer, they then put their equipment in front of ours. So I would have to come in and go to, there's two telecoms there, but they're government mandated, called China Telecom and China Unicom. And you'd bring them in, plug into this router, and then it would be distributed out from there. It would, it'd cut our profits in half because I was making, 35%, 40% gross profit on it. And we would have to pay China Telecom or China Unicom this 15%, and it killed us. So that's what happened in China. And in Mexico,
it was like a tariff on you.
Yeah, exactly. But they basically said, well, for you to operate here, now we have to put our equipment here, and it's going to cost you to have our equipment, especially in this space. Then with Mexico, just as bad, but you used to be able to operate in Mexico and get things in and out. There's kind of there's a data center there. I won't bring up their name, but they're kind of like the McDonald's of data centers for our world. And they're like an embassy, if you will, for our services. So you can bring your services in. You don't have to have a license to operate there because you're operating through and using their piggybacking on their license. So our services are coming in.
Nerd talk.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, piggybacking. So when it was fine operating, but then if we had to get equipment in and out, something broke, then we had to you had to have a local actually there that was an actual employee and a resident in Mexico to actually get this stuff in and out, and we didn't have it. So now we had to turn around and get a company over there and pay these couriers and all this other stuff to get our services in and out, and it just became a nightmare. So I was I'm not saying I should have voted for Hillary, but the math worked out in the end where I knew what was going to happen and it did. So I regretted it, though, I will say. And then
You do well trying to justify why you voted for it.
that's why I voted.
Well, I have a confession to make because when Clinton was running, I was younger.
Bill.
A lot younger. Bill Clinton.
I'm not going to hit you for that.
All right. So I was a lot younger then. And I thought Hillary was actually like, look at this smart woman.
Mm-hmm.
She's a lawyer. She's got all this to offer.
I used to thought Chelsea was good looking
Yeah.
when she was younger.
They say Chelsea's a very nice person in person.
I'm sure
people
she
have
is.
dealt with her.
Yeah.
But I thought that Hillary was actually like a legit person, everything. And as time went on, it was like when Clinton was running.
When people started dying, you got a little nervous.
I mean, I don't want to say that because I'm never gonna badmouth that family. Okay. I thought you get like a 2-for-1 thing because here was this person who was highly educated. Like it wasn't just. And again, she made the move with trying to do the the precursor to Obamacare, and it didn't work. And you realize as time went on, it wasn't a good thing that
You
was
have to
happening.
remember too, Brian. No, back then nobody was really aware that the media was in control of all of this. There was no
Right.
independent media back then. There was no internet. There was no podcast. There was no nothing. So you only
We
saw what they
believed in
wanted
you.
you to see. They sold you the package on Clintons. That's what happened.
We believed the 5 o'clock news.
Right. That's
Yep.
what we
Back
thought.
then.
We took it for legit.
Yeah.
There was no counter to that.
When I was a fan of Clinton, not knowing what was going on behind the scenes, what was going on with him, but he seemed like a great guy.
Let's be fair. He wasn't the only president doing it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been going on for a while. So
Yeah. Hillary obviously, especially when it came to Benghazi, was like, when you look at that situation, you go, what kind of morally she's done? How do you leave all these people behind to get murdered?
I had a bunch of them guys that were there on the show, Oz and Tonto and a few of them.
They were legitimately left.
They all talk
to
about
die.
it. Yeah.
There's another guy, Mike Glover,
Yeah.
who was I don't know if you had.
I didn't have him on.
You didn't have him on. He was a whistleblower for the whole thing, and the whole thing was, it was a video, it was this, it was that. The guy was in, what do you call it, CAG Delta, right?
okay,
So they were actively hunting for the guy who started the attack on Benghazi, and he goes, he's watching us going, a video. This is a terrorist. We're looking to kill this guy, and they're like, oh, it was a video. Shut up and move on.
yeah.
But you could see where her morals were.
Yeah. So anyway, it kind of, fast forward in, 2018, 2019 is kind of when I started to get red pilled and, things would happen. I had a sergeant major of the Marine Corps, actually was my old gunnery sergeant. And I met him when I was in, so I met him another time when I got out, and I was working for Halliburton for a little while in Iraq. So I went back there and I was talking to him about different things and stuff. But after that whole thing happened, I get back and I kind of get red pilled a little bit. That's kind of like the start of it. And I realized that some of the stuff that they were saying on the news, such as, if like they would say stuff like Trump didn't show up for the troops on Christmas Eve, but it was they'd left out he was there on Christmas Day, right? And it was like little things like that, and it was like little stabs here and there where it wasn't really like aggravating to me at that point, but I guess it was kind of building up, and the end result, and we talked about this actually on our last podcast, was there was a I don't know if you probably remember this, either in Syria or Iran they had a fire exercise that they were showing during Trump's presidency.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw that, and even before the details came out on it, I'm like, that's Camp Helen.
Right.
I was like, I know that's Camp Helen because I was part of a artillery group and we did firing exercises there. So I saw it and I was like, wow. I was like, I know that's a lie for sure, right? I couldn't verify anything else, but I could definitely verify that, right? I went to I literally it was about a couple days after. And the final straw was Kayleigh McInerney was on TV one time, and one of the newscasters for Fox News cut her off when she was talking. And I looked over at my wife and I said, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, and I know you're going to think I'm nuts, but I really think there's a coup on our president. I said, I truly do. I said, I feel it, And she kept saying, you said this magic word, the Marines program you. They said this word, you've been activated, and she was really concerned.
It was a crayon that you ate.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a chance to see all of that in real time because I had press credentials to the White House. So I was there 12 times while Trump was president, and I was with the press corps. And it was eye-opening just as a regular guy to see how they operate and to watch what's going on there. And the whole thing isn't for real. It's all a joke, the way that these guys are doing this. And the way that they're talking about Trump behind the scenes is like, these are the guys who are supposed to be non-biased. They're supposed to be giving us just the facts. And I became a part of this fake news because I was sat in on a briefing, which I wasn't supposed to be on the briefing. And because at the time there was only if you were not in the pool, whatever they call it, the
White House press
so,
corps.
I'm right. I'm not a member of the Corps. I had a press credential for a single day, and then I would renew it every day. But I wasn't allowed to be in the press briefing. But I sat in the back and was just kind of like fooling around with my camera, like, I was just playing Mickey the Dope, like, before it started. Somebody came in right before the press briefing was counting the people. She's like, we got too many people here, and I'm like, just fiddling with my thing.
Trying to don't attract any attention.
Yeah, and the guy's like, I'm like, he's like, hey, you can't be in here. You got to get out of here. I'm like, oh, all right. So, like, I know she's going to walk in any second. So I take my time. I'm getting my phone. And I stand up, and she walks in. So I step right to the side. So I'm in the briefing now. So she hammers the press because it was the time where all the COVID stuff was going on. And she was explaining to them with a video slideshow of all of them being hypocrites. Like Pelosi going into the hair salon.
This was Kayleigh McEnany.
Kayleigh McEnany, right. And so I'm raising my hand to try to get a question in, and she calls on the girl right in front of me, and I was dying to get one in, and I didn't get called on. So after the briefing is over, normally at the time, whenever she was turning to leave, they'd all start shouting and cackling. When is he going to resign? Why doesn't the president? They all start yelling things at her. So I'm thinking, like, not today. She's done with the briefing. She turns around, and I yell out, "You crushed that, Kayleigh." Everyone stops and turns around to look to see who it was. And I didn't realize Kayleigh's husband, Sean, was standing next to me. So they all think it was Sean that yelled it. And so somebody had said something to him, and he walked out, and they go, yeah, that was Kayleigh's husband that said it. And then in my head, I'm like, Kayleigh's husband, I want to get him on First Class Fatherhood. So I run out the door, and right before he gets to the Oval Office, I'm like, Sean, I'm Alec Lace. I hit him with a pitch, to get him on the show.
Yeah.
So it's all over. I go across the street to get a coffee. I get a call from the White House. They're like, are you the guy with the First Class Fatherhood? I said, yeah. They go, did you yell out, "You crushed that, Kayleigh," at the end of the briefing? And I'm thinking, I'm like, yeah, am I in trouble for that?
Yeah.
They go, no. They're already putting out reports that it was Sean Gilmartin, her husband, that said it. I said, no, it was definitely me. I have it on recording if you need it. So they're like, oh, no, it's okay. So they send out a email blast to everybody at the White House saying that, to correct that, it was not Sean, it was this guy, Alec Lace, of First Class Fatherhood, who said it. So everybody knew it at 11 o'clock in the morning that it was me.
That's a good plug, too.
Well, on the way home that night, I'm taking the train. My wife calls me and says, you're not going to believe this. It's 8 o'clock at night. She goes, Anderson Cooper is on 360 right now, and he's saying that it was her husband that said it. So Kayleigh McEnany takes a video of this and puts it on Twitter and calls him out and says, this is fake news. And she puts a clip of the email saying, it's this guy, Alec Lace.
You were part of fake news.
So now I'm like,
awesome.
wow. So now my DMs are blowing up, and now I have like the Intercept, and all these people are like, who is this guy, Alec Lace? What is he doing at the White House? Like, so it became like this big mystery, and all these fake articles were being written, like Kayleigh plants friends in the White House to cheer her on, and it was like, no, that ain't true. So I became an actual part of seeing how that fake news can just take off.
Yeah.
Now you get to talk to her on Fox all the time when they have you.
Yeah.
So, and I won't get.
I ended up having her husband on the show though too.
Nice.
Really nice guy, but
Really? How many kids did they have at that?
they just had their second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't get too deep into this, but as you kind of started this, I kind of alluded to in the beginning, with the information boom and the internet and stuff, and kind of some things come to light, So I got this thing forwarded over to me one time, and it was like the space shuttle, space shuttle Challenger that went down, and they're forwarding over to me the woman Resnick that was on the shuttle when it went down.
Is this tinfoil hat time, Joe?
I'm just gonna say what it was to me. It was it was eye opening. You know what I mean? And then I start to you kind of tie it into what's going on right now, and then you start to think like, no, they wouldn't lie about that, right?
I'm totally anti-conspiracy theory.
Yeah. So no, I'll just say this: you could think what you want. I'm not saying I believe it either, but
there are a lot of similarities.
What are the lengths that they would have went to back then to actually do this, right? But Space Shuttle Challenger, goes down. This girl, I believe her name is Judy Resnick. There's a person with her same name.
Right, looks like her.
Looks exactly
right.
like
I've
her.
seen all
The
that,
deal. Yeah. So she's with she's at some big prestigious college as well too. She's like an aerospace engineer. You know what I mean?
It's a big coincidence.
And she's the exact same age as the other Judy Resnick would have been. You know what I mean? And she's going by
Because
Judith
this was
Resnick.
all before the internet.
Yeah.
Because I was a kid. I remember coming home from school and
Yep.
the Challenger. I think I watched it live on TV.
Yeah, and I won't say that I'm not getting into a conspiracy. I don't know if it happened or didn't happen or whatever, right? But the fact that now I know the lengths that the news would take to lie to us. Now all of a sudden, I have to do my own research on everything that I see, and there was a point there in the whole in 2020, probably up to 22. I started to use DuckDuckGo and Google and all the others because
Bing or whatever.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
So those that don't know that on the tech side of it, Google uses paid advertisements. So you can use they call it what do they call it? I'm not going to remember, but basically it's you can pay for your searches to be upfront. So when
to push it.
when you search something and back in the day, they didn't have any restrictions to it. So you would search something like, and there was actually a lawsuit because of it. Someone would say, I'm looking for hookers, right? And it would say find hookers on eBay, right? Because eBay would be the biggest payment firm to Google. And they would kind of do all that. So that's how it's kind of set up where that's why you see like Microsoft and like all the big names up first on the searches, and then it starts to kind of trickle down. It's not based upon clicks and stuff like that, like DuckDuckGo and others. Right. So I would go to when I was searching something, I would go to DuckDuckGo. And then I would look at the one that doesn't match up with what it says, right? That basically says the opposite. And then I would start kind of doing research on that and trying to figure it out. But that's basically the basis for the podcast. It was American Sidebar is like everything's going on, hey, Sidebar, did you hear what just happened? And that's kind of the gist of this podcast is trying to get down to, kind of normal life, right? Just understanding what a normal person would think of that news article or, what happened in the country. So.
You've interviewed so many people, so many different levels of people. Who do you think, does anybody have an answer to how we get back to normal?
Well, I think just like I said before, I think just being able to have some kind of civil discourse in the country is what it's going to take. Because right now it's just you and it's hard to have conversations with. And short answer is no. No one has the answer.
No one has
the answer. And it's just about trying to find a way to talk to people without insulting them. Because that's what happens during these conversations. Like the minute that we disagree on something, we start with the insults, and it's like it gets out of control quick. So it's going to take tempers to calm down and to have some kind of conversation that doesn't lead to fireworks. So I don't know. I don't know, and nobody that I've had on knows how to get this thing. I think the biggest thing that could happen is that the mainstream media falls into the ocean and is gone forever. I think they're the biggest ones that fan the flame.
It's crazy because you think about it. What's the mainstream media?
Well, there's a good video on that shows you the same people saying the exact same thing on every network.
And every network.
It's the same
Sinclair.
message. Sinclair. Right.
Yep.
It goes out onto all of the same. That's the mainstream media. They get the same briefing. It's like we think because they put some good-looking woman on there telling you what the story is, that she's telling you what she thinks. She's reading it off the teleprompter. It's been written. She read the script. All these things are scripted, and they're all reading the same
and
script.
it's the same thing, network to network.
Right. It's done intentionally. It's not done just by happenstance. This is a design that's happened. The message is being put out by the mainstream. That's mainstream media.
I was at an event. It was a local political event, Board of Ed meeting that they were voting on some stuff, and I was holding a parental rights sign. So I actually had to check the sign to make sure it had just said parental rights because they were calling me a Nazi for holding a sign. And I'm sitting there going, the sign says parental rights. And News 12 was there. And they were interviewing only that side. We were behind back. I think I was maybe with 6 people. A woman asked me, hey, can you hold my sign? Yeah, absolutely. It says parental rights. I'm getting screamed at. You're a Nazi. You're an effing Nazi, right? Next thing you know, I'm like, but News 12 never came over and said, let's interview this guy that they're calling a Nazi.
Right.
Like all the sign said. And like I said, I actually had to look at it again, make sure it only said parental rights. Because why are these people calling me a Nazi? Like, my grandfather actually fought the Nazis, was wounded by them. And I'm not that guy.
Right.
I don't know where because I wanted parental
this stuff,
rights.
though, Brian, has been coming here for a very long time, and we're just seeing the tipping point of it now. But it's been coming a long time. Like,
and it's based in Marxism.
It's Marxism, and it has come here a long time ago. If you look back in the 30s, Alice Bailey put out a 10-point list of how to destroy the Christian family and how to enter into this globalist new world order. If you read the list, everything that she says all came true to this day. Now, they got control of the universities. They got control of the mainstream media. They got control of Hollywood. They've gotten control of every aspect of our life. And this didn't just happen like in the last, since Trump ran for president.
Yeah.
This has been coming for decades.
It's been going on a long
And we're
time.
just seeing it now, and we're thinking like, wow, how did this happen? It's been coming while we've been watching football, while we've been watching baseball, while we've been doing all these other things. That's been coming here.
We're very comfortable here, too.
I personally think that Trump smoked it out. You know what I mean? He wasn't part of kind of the globalist elites. You know what I mean? They shunned him right when he switched over from Democrat to Republican.
They loved him. They loved him years ago.
Oh yeah.
But they'll tell you now, they'll swear that they hated him their whole life.
Yeah.
I always hated
Didn't
that guy.
he put out a book with letters
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
recently.
from
did.
all those people?
Yep.
I mean, you could look at like the old Oprah with him in like
I
90s.
did see that interview.
You remember
Yeah.
that?
She was gushing.
She was asking for him to run.
All the
for president.
rappers, I think
Yeah.
he's mentioned in like 60-something rap songs. They
Yeah.
all loved him.
Yep.
Everybody, especially Hollywood people, they all love Trump, and now they hate him.
It's so funny that it was almost like they just all sense went out the window, right? And they were just like, "That's it. We don't care." They realize what we're doing. We're going for them, right?
Yeah.
It's
The same machine that turned on to turn everybody against Trump was turned on during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You had, and that should be studied by psychologists for years, because you watched people that you knew for your
Mm-hmm.
whole life, and you watched how they behaved during a pandemic. You were like, wait a minute, what happened? What just happened to this guy? And it was mind-boggling to see some of the things that people were doing during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel they're trying to bring it back.
Yeah, they said that. And Trump already came out and said we will not comply. There's no way we're going to have those same conversations for another 2 years. There's no way we're doing it, because you felt like just smashing your head against the wall.
I think this time people will fight back.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
the
it's not
thing
just
is,
gonna
though,
be,
too, there was kind of a underground apology tour going on. So people are going, yeah, we stepped over the line, almost like looking for forgiveness. Now,
Well,
They're
that's
talk-
what they called it. Didn't they call it like COVID amnesty or something?
Yeah.
Right.
Pandemic
but
amnesty.
now that they're talking about it again, the other day I dropped my daughter off at work, and I see these two women pull up in a car, and both of them are wearing masks. And they're middle-aged women, didn't look unhealthy or anything like that, right? And they pull up and they're wearing masks in the car. They get out of the car, and they actually take the mask off and walk into the store. And I'm saying,
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. All of it was.
because I've been using PPE for 30 years.
Right.
And I understand the way it works. I understand why it works. And I need you to explain to me, like, what's that contagion that we're trying to prevent?
Yeah.
And they're in the car together, driving around, almost like, now it's almost like justifying what they did. Like to the kids, at the time, my son is 8, he was 5. And it was, you were going to be in trouble if the kid didn't wear a mask.
Yeah.
Where it was, and again, even this discussion, I wouldn't even talk about this on Facebook for a while.
Yeah.
Because you get,
Oh yeah.
your page would get banned.
It's just like anything though. Even like where
seems to become like they're pushing for it to come back again.
even on a lower level, you go to like in where I live, and I live on the Atlantic Highland side of Middletown, and you go to local stores and anywhere in New Jersey, and you can't use plastic bags, right?
Ugh.
But you go in the back where the meat section is, and there's plastic bags hanging there, and those are fine, right? It's just it's so strange that they allow certain things to happen.
The thing with that, Joe, is like I go to ShopRite every week and do the shopping for the family, and everything I buy comes in a plastic container. Every item.
Yeah.
And the only plastic container that I ever reused was the ShopRite bags.
Yeah.
I reused them for garbage.
I have
for
2 dogs.
Me too.
I have 2 dogs.
Yeah, me too.
They had so many multiple uses, those bags.
Yep.
The only thing I never use is everything else. Like whatever, I open the pack and I throw it right in the garbage. Everything comes in plastic. It's like you're looking at it like, why are we doing this?
Even cereal boxes, you open it up, you
Yeah.
plastic bag in between.
We go to Chick-fil-A one day at the supposed Christian company, which Trevor Luden did a great expose on. That's a whole nother podcast, whatever. But there's 18 items in plastic, but they have plastic straw. Paper straw.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you go to Starbucks and you have to ask for a plastic.
That's a new
straw.
scam too. It's like you got to pay another 30 cents to get like a reusable.
A reusable bag.
But if you go to McDonald's and get a soda, they give it to you in a plastic
In a
cup.
plastic
and
cup,
you use
yeah.
a paper straw.
with a
Yeah.
plastic
With a plastic
container with the
cup.
bubbles.
And when
yeah.
you look at a plastic bag, you go, I could take every plastic bag all three of us, and Vince, let's include Vince, had used an entire life,
Yeah.
and compress it, and it's like the size of a bale of hay.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, all these other products are
And look,
everything.
Look what's happened with the masks. How they have become an environmental
They're in the
catastrophe.
ocean.
They're
They're-
everywhere.
they're-
It's
it's
terrible
disgusting.
for the wildlife.
Yeah.
But yet they want to bring those back. You know.
And
Yeah.
they're all made, and you see them right. And the best part was about the whole mask thing is it says right on there, does not prevent
Right. Yeah.
respiratory
Yep. That's the ones we
illness.
had at work. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah.
Well, then you heard. I want to get something else, but did you hear about Fauci? So I guess an article came out about Fauci when I guess he did. I don't know if it was at. He did something on the Spanish flu. Like they went and did tests on the Spanish flu and trying to find out why it was so dangerous and so many people died. And they came back to that when people wore masks, they were getting upper respiratory infections.
Yeah.
And that's what caused the deaths,
Yeah, and the problem is talking. Like I did an interview with Dr. Malone. I had Dr. Peter McCullough on the show. Those episodes, you're not allowed to play them. They got pulled.
Yeah.
Even clips from.
He was awesome,
TikTok,
by the
The
way.
credentials that those guys have
Right.
is off the
But
off
they
the charts.
label them as conspiracy
Yeah.
theorists, even though that they come.
Which one was in charge of the Human Genome Project? There was one of those guys who
Well,
was
Malone is the one that was involved in creating the technology that's used in the mRNA vaccine.
Right.
That's him. I mean,
and you're talking about you can't get any more expert than
Right,
that.
yeah.
And a guy like that went, hey, we actually messed up, and you play that episode, it's off. You're canceled.
So getting back to you're very involved on the media side of things. What really is troublesome to me, especially being a parent, is that the media is allowed to lie, right? Did something happen where did they change the name into like an entertainment or something like that where it actually changed, or has it always been that way? I thought, I don't know if anybody else thinks it, but I always thought they had to tell the truth, right? And I never seen before, and maybe just being naive and you're just kind of going with it. I was around during the Iraqi wars and stuff like that, especially the first one. And you're watching it, and you have like Geraldo Rivera out there, he's got like Kevlar on and crawling.
another lunatic.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
do you
we didn't know
remember?
that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Do you remember he actually drew a map in the
Yes.
ground?
Yeah,
And he showed. I don't know if it was the 101st Airborne,
yeah.
and he actually drew a map in the ground.
That was the
Said-
first Gulf War, I
the-
believe.
was
right?
it? Wasn't the second? Where he gave their position away
It might have been
on live
I
TV
remember
on
what you're
live
talking
TV?
about, though.
Really?
Yeah, but they used to check themselves.
Uh-huh.
That I think that's the difference.
I
Now
think we have this false idea that we used to get the straight news, like Walter Cronkite. He was a straight. That guy was just the same way. We
when
just
you
didn't
talk
know it.
to do you ever hear of John Stryker Meyer from Trenton, New Jersey?
No.
So he was with that group SOG, was the Secret War, and he's got a podcast called SOGcast,
Yeah.
right? And he's had guys on there, and they were talking about Walter Cronkite. So things that they were doing, in actuality, and Walter Cronkite is broadcasting different things.
Yeah.
And they're going, I'm in Cambodia right now, where we're allegedly not there, and Walter Cronkite is saying different things.
Yeah.
And he basically, these guys are fighting for their lives. And he declared, it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
And he goes, we're watching civilians get murdered, all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And Walter Cronkite was, and everybody at the 5 o'clock news, Walter Cronkite said it.
Yeah, and
we believe him.
That was more of kind of what I was alluding to. It was just whether it was Trump kind of smoking this out or what, but to me it looked very drastic, like it was all of a sudden.
Right.
But then you kind of circle back and you start looking
gone
back
on a
into
long
it. And you're
time.
Almost like the
oh.
Marxism that we see in the country now. We think,
Yeah.
wow, this just popped up, but it's
Yeah.
been here coming
yeah.
a long time. Same with
Yeah.
the media. It's been the same way.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at how kind of we're so polarized with the whole Ukraine versus Russia deal, right? And we have some clips that are going to come out. Again, you're our first interview, so
Honored.
I really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
So we kind of touched on that. But the funny thing is there's some reasons why he did it, right? Whether when he went into Georgia and the whole for us, it was just he was invading a country and taking it over, and then
Talking about Putin.
Yeah, and then he came back and was like, no. He was like that. We're trying to get control of that port because fentanyl was coming in from Afghanistan, and we were trying to block the ports and get control of those ports, right? America would have done that. You know what I mean? Like our president. Well,
we're allowing all that to come into our country.
Not
right
this
now.
particular one, right? But usually, I mean, that's what we do, right? We go in there and try to stop the bad stuff from coming in. But you look at kind of the way the media spins this. It's just it's so off the wall that for me, I feel like legally they changed their name or something that is allowing them to not tell the truth.
You mean the media are saying,
Yeah.
we're something different. We're an entertainment.
Yeah.
I just think that they don't have any checks and balances anymore. Because who's going to, it's almost like you probably
You gotta follow the money though. Who is the one that's putting the money up? That's where
Didn't you have
find the answer.
Morgan Luttrell on your podcast?
I had both.
You had
brothers.
both?
I had Morgan and
Right.
Marcus.
So before Morgan was, before he won his election in Congress, he was on a podcast and he was talking about when he was Ryan Zinke's aide when he was a congressman, and he's saying, here's a guy who knows what's going on. He's a retired SEAL, combat vet. I think he broke his back.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Right? And he says, I'm working for a congressman. And you go in there, and the aide to a senior congressman is dressing down. And the aide, not the elected person, dressing down a congressman. Like, you better get with the program. Like, if you want to deliver anything, how do you combat that? How do you turn around and fix a problem where the aide that I don't know that guy's name, I know the congressman's name, maybe.
This is the issue, Brian, where people talk about term limits. Like everyone's like, oh, we should have term limits, term limits. It's not those guys. It's those guys that you're talking about, the aides that are there, the people that are embedded in that system.
They're the ones who are running
They're the ones,
system.
right? The faces just change, but the actual people that are running it don't change.
He's working for a guy, Ryan Zinke. We have a mutual friend, Craig Sawyer. He's been on your
Craig's
podcast,
good, yeah.
right? So I volunteer for Craig for a couple of years, right? Ryan Zinke was Craig Sawyer's commander in SEAL Team 6. And you have these guys getting dressed down by an aide that the public didn't elect, going, you better get with the program? Like, how do you move on from it? I don't know how you move on from it. Like you're saying, it's term limits are one thing, but how do you have an underground, what do you call it, the deep state?
Yeah.
Is that the deep state?
Well,
What is the,
Remember the whole thing with Biden where, someone asked him, he was getting interviewed, it's got to be like 20, 30 years ago, and someone said, with all the lobbyists that are out there right now, how do you stay, clean, right? And he comes back and he goes, well, thank you for thinking that I'm a trustworthy person.
Right.
I really appreciate that. And then he kind of goes through the whole lobbying thing. Well, lobbyists come into you, and then you're beholden to, that $10 million that they give you for your campaigns, and kind of goes through that whole thing. But that's what it is, right? I mean, when it comes down to it.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know how you stop that. I mean,
you have to look at this. The government has become what the mafia used to be in this country. Like the mafia used to control all this stuff, elections, sports. They controlled all of it, and now they don't control it anymore. The government does. The government took all these things over.
They're
from
the new mafia.
It's the same tactic. You buy the stuff, and that's what they did. And
you have a kid that went to Yale, and he's running the congressman,
right?
And which equals hundreds of millions of dollars. Where the mafia, all right, they had nice houses. Let's face it, they did have nice houses.
But everything that they did and turned into a big enterprise, like whether it be loan sharking, where now you have credit cards. You had the bookmakers, where now gambling is legalized everywhere. You had the drug market, which now we have drugs are legal, decriminalized in many states. So it's like every aspect that they used to control is now controlled by the government. I did a great interview with Mike Francisi. He was a former Colombo captain.
I'm a Brooklyn guy. I'm very familiar with him.
He was phenomenal. He invited me to come see him speak. I met with him, and I was going to do an episode on his show. I've still got to hook up with him, but he tells you the government now is running similar tactics and similar style that the old school mafia used to run.
He was a genius mobster. The guy came. Are you familiar with who he's?
He was
talking
making
about?
$10 million a week in a
was
tax scam.
skimming
and a gas tax
from
scam.
gas tax.
Yeah,
and it was something that if we played telephone, I couldn't explain how. The guy was just. I mean,
he was one of the top earners for the family.
Top earners. Yeah. I mean, probably didn't have to go kill people. Just scammed money off of thousands of gas stations. It was a big thing.
But that's what we're seeing now. That type of level of corruption is what you're seeing in the government.
And when they busted him, it was a big thing. But again, he's making how much a week? These people are making billions a week. And
how do you overcome the machine like that, though? I mean, when you're looking at kind of what's going on, and I won't, I know we don't want to talk about election interference and stuff like that, but at what point can we protect all of this, right?
It's going to take, listen, how did we win the Revolutionary War? It was only 3% of the Americans that fought and won it. It's a small group that does it, and that's what it's going to take this time, too. It's going to take conversations like this, people that are going to be willing to stand up and really just fight for this country. And now you say that, it's like, oh, you said fight for the country. That means you're going to go bomb Congress. Like, that's not what you mean. It's like, but it's going to take.
But you have to stand up.
You have to, and I try to say this, like, and that's why I put my voice out there. It's like everything matters. Like, it may seem like, well, why should I make this video? It doesn't matter. Everything matters. Some things matter more than others, but there's nothing that doesn't matter. So I encourage people, voice your opinion, put it out there. We have the tools right now available to do that. Put it out there. It definitely makes a difference because you don't know who you can inspire. You never know who's listening.
People are scared. I do my videos on my Republican page, right? And one of the things I always say is get off the sidelines. People are scared. I have people. I can't donate to that because I work for XYZ.
I get that a lot, actually.
Right? They don't. There's no way. Like I went on Fox News and I go, get off the sidelines. They asked me to. I've been on 4 times. What have you been on? About 500 times right now.
Yeah,
but again, CNN is not like, oh, you're a right winger. I would have been happy to go on CNN or MSNBC to fight for parental rights.
Yeah,
they're not calling. And but even most people go, I couldn't do that. Well, my job, I couldn't do that. Well, I have a job too.
Yeah.
I have 7 kids. I don't want to be the guy out in the front lines. But what do? Do I look back? Do I on my deathbed? Do I turn around and go, I didn't even try for you?
When I kind of started getting into some of this stuff and going, especially running for the Board of Ed, I had my head down. I wasn't political, right? I kind of kept my head down. So I kind of had my head down, and I was just raising a family, trying to be a good dad, and trying to be a good father, and a good husband. And then when all this kind of happened, I realized at that point it's not just about my kids, right? Because they're going to be in this community with other kids, and if those kids are screwed up, I have to help them as well. And that was the main reason why I stepped up. And, my wife even asked me at one point, she was like, why are you doing this? Why, let's just, let's get a house somewhere and
enjoy our life.
The Poconos and let's just get away. And I was like, yeah, but what happens to our kids? What happens to their kids? Right. And, she's like, install good morals and stuff like that. But I was like, what about the other kids? They're eventually going to corrupt our kids. Right. It may not be, we're not going to be around forever, so maybe it won't even be our grandkids, but it'll be their kids, right? And eventually, it'll be over, right? So
when you come, different generations, like my grandfathers are in World War II, you look back and you go, some of these people went through some rough times, and people stood up and stopped it. Stop the bad stuff from going on. You look at some of the wars. As a kid, I didn't think the Vietnam War, what was that? How could Vietnam possibly affect me? When you start talking to guys who were in Vietnam, and especially the guys who work with the indigenous people, they saw massacres going on. Like and there was a guy who was a Vietnamese pilot that was on a show, and he's talking about it was Jocko Willink show, okay? And he's going, the guy fought for Americans, but meanwhile, this guy had fought communism since he was 15 years old. Mm-hmm. And he's now living in California. And he's telling him the playbook that I saw from 15 years old up and, now he fought with the American Special Forces and all this stuff, right? Fighting communism. His father was murdered. I think this is the guy. He actually lost both hands. In a helicopter crash, he wound up being in a re-education camp, whatever that means, in Vietnam. After the Americans pulled out, he says it was the same playbook that I see now. The guy is living in California, has kids, grandkids. He wound up losing a kid in the time it took him to get out of Vietnam into America. Mm-hmm. The guy gives the entire timeline, and he goes, I went escape. I think it was 6-7 years in re-education camps, right? He gets out by boat to all these different countries. He's now living in California, very successful person, and he turns around to this guy, Jocko, and he says, I'm starting to look for another boat. Like,
right, yeah. Reagan told you there's no other where to go.
This is a guy. He goes. You got to understand. I saw this before Vietnam became communist, and I see it here in my grandkids' schools. The guy says, "I'm looking for another boat." He's 80-something years old.
Yeah,
and he's going, "I'm not going to live through another communist revolution."
And it was alarming. I want to say it was about a year ago when you started to hear kind of some of the kids say, "Good, we want socialism," right?
Yeah.
And it's like you don't even know what that means, and they see someone like an AOC or someone like that that's kind of pitching it where she doesn't even know what that means, right? And these are
she's
all
wearing Louis Vuitton shoes,
multi-millionaires,
tax
right?
the rich.
That's another that's a whole other deal with all the politicians making $120,000 a year and worth 30, 40, 50 million. So
yeah, eat the rich.
Yeah,
eat the rich. They're all I mean, I don't know what she's worth, but
yeah.
I mean, some of them
You just seen that now. Oprah Winfrey and The Rock. They're asking for donations for Hawaii.
Yeah, they own how much land there?
Right. She's a billionaire. He's worth almost $1 billion, and they're asking you to donate. Yeah.
And all the other houses are all blown up.
They're all
except for
except
theirs.
hers. Yeah. And all the mansions survived. It was a miracle.
Like in 50, 60 years, they're gonna crack open our brains and try to study this whole thing on what exactly went down.
If aliens are watching us, they're going, "What's going on with these people?"
It's funny. Someone said the other day. They said, if aliens actually came, I would actually welcome them and say, "Thank God, someone's going to help us from
right,
this
yeah.
crap." So, anyway, it's a great podcast. Thanks for having. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate.
It's an honor having you.
Yeah, it's
an
an honor
it really
to be here.
is.
Yeah, best of luck with the new show, guys. I really appreciate being on.
It really is an honor.
Awesome. This was American Sidebar. Have a good day.